Pests beware, your fields have heroes. The Pests and Predators podcast is brought to you by Field Heroes and is powered by the Western Grains Research Foundation. Learn how beneficial insects fight pests and protect your crops. Visit fieldheroes.ca today.
Sean Haney here with RealAgriculture.com. New legislation, a new private members bill introduced this week as Parliament has returned. It is Bill 202. And what this bill is, it's got some familiarity to it. Joining us to chat about it is Executive Director with CAFTA. It is Michael Harvey. Michael, how's it going?
Good. Yourself?
Really good. Okay. Bill 202. What is this?
It's the same as Bill 282, and it's the same as it was the time before that when it had another number. Basically, what it says is that Canada's trade negotiators are not allowed to discuss supply managed industries.
Oh, so does a group like CAFTA have the same response or feeling to 202 as you did 282?
Yeah, nothing's changed. I mean, the situation is a terrible piece of legislation. We think what it does is basically hold the entire Canadian economy hostage to the needs of a small group. The Canadian government has said that it'll protect supply management at the negotiating table. That's fine. You always have defensive interests in a trade negotiation. We have top-notch trade negotiators. They don't need to be legislatively handcuffed. And when you legislatively handcuff them, what they say is that it will lead to less comprehensive trade outcomes, which means you're hurting the entire Canadian economy.
I guess you can't speak for the Bloc, but based on people you talk to around Ottawa, why is there such a thrust? The multiple attempts to get this kind of legislation through, it gets stalled out. You know, it doesn't exactly. It's not where it rushes through. So why?
Look, I mean, the Bloc has a two-pronged strategy. Sometimes they achieve things legislatively, so they portray themselves as defending the interest of Quebec. Sometimes they don't achieve things, which is evidence that Quebec isn't getting a fair deal in their perspective and therefore should separate. So the Bloc's got this method. Their politics are quite simple. They find issues that play to a specific audience and they portray themselves as defenders of Quebec. They don't need to look at the broader national interest, but they're not looking at the broader Quebec interest either, because this is a very bad piece of legislation for the economic interests of the people of Quebec.
Even dairy farmers are not all necessarily on the same page on this. I hear a lot of different perspectives, some very much for it and some very concerned about some of the unintended consequences of this kind of legislation if it became law. Now, Prime Minister Carney, he commented on this, and he said, and maybe you can interpret this. You've been a diplomat. You can kind of put words together here. He's going to carefully consider the Bloc's bill to enshrine supply management into law. What does carefully consider mean?
I hope carefully consider means realize that it's a terrible piece of legislation. Carefully consider can mean a lot of things, Sean. But at the end of the day, the Prime Minister said during the campaign that legislation like this wasn't necessary to protect supply management in trade negotiations because the government would protect supply management in trade negotiations. And again, CAFTA's position is not one saying that anything should be conceded in trade negotiations around supply management. That's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is that legislatively handcuffing our negotiators for one industry is terrible trade policy that makes us look dumb, that exposes weaknesses in our system, and is a red flag to negotiators from other countries. And if you're talking about 2026, negotiators of other countries would be the United States and the CUSMA renewal.
Supply management can be protected without this kind of legislation, correct?
That's right. Any industry can be protected without this legislation. You go into a negotiation, you have offensive and defensive goals, objectives. Our trade negotiators have protected supply management. Supply management's there, and we have all kinds of trade agreements with other countries. So supply management can obviously be protected without this kind of legislation.
New number, 202. We mentioned previously this was 282. 202 does not get the benefit of the progress that 282 had made. It starts from square one, correct?
Well, it could move through more quickly. It's already second reading, because that happens right away. It could, if the House decided unanimously, move more quickly. That would be a strong move. I don't foresee that. I would expect it to go through the process. The number is just a number. There's a numbering system when you introduce these pieces of legislation.
You don't get to choose. Like my lucky numbers, like combination of threes and sevens, and that's what I want to do. It's just sort of a random thing.
I don't. I work with some people who are nerds in parliamentary procedure, but I'm afraid I'm not, Sean.
That's too much of the weeds. We're early days here in the Carney government. Any considerations or thoughts or reactions to the trade minister?
Well, he's a man who knows the files. He was parliamentary secretary before at CAFTA. We had him attending our board meeting last spring, if I remember. He was on the International Trade Committee. I've appeared before him 4 or 5 times at least. So he's a man who's been following the international trade issues for a long time. He's an intelligent guy. He's dedicated. I mean, nothing negative to say. I won't say I know him super well, but nothing negative to say.
Yeah, there's a lot of concern in agriculture industry about the lack of attention that trade got in the last 10 years under the Trudeau government, rightly or wrongly. Just this is what I'm hearing from people, and I have my own thoughts. Do you sense that trade is more of a focus in this government than the last one?
Absolutely. I mean, the early messaging. If you look at the mandate letter that the Prime Minister sent to his ministers, international trade, the relationship with the United States, front and center. The speech from the throne was basically the mandate letter, fleshed out a little bit. Again, that big space to a restructuring of the international economic order and our relationship with the United States. It's very, very high on the list of priorities, right?
That's good for agriculture if the actions follow through on that.
That's right. But it's the messaging is very positive in that sense. It's obvious. Let's face it. I mean, how President Trump has been managing things has forced the Canadian government to put the relationship with the United States, international trade, front and center, right? Tariffs are a very negative thing from our perspective, but they definitely concentrate the mind.
Michael, thanks a lot for joining us here today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, Sean.